All right, guys, welcome to this new tutorial. Today, I'm going to show you how you can create this watercolor effects in Illustrator. You're going to notice that I created a bunch of outlines. I'm going to click on my outline view here. I got my inspiration from this artist called Dual Tam. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but I really like the way his artwork that I found online looks. It kind of has a nice little touch. So if you notice, there's a lot of strokes. I work with a lot of brushes. I apply some effects to them as well. And I'm going to show you some different techniques that I use to create this type of effects. Here's the actual work from this artist, Duo Tam. I just got the name from this signature here. It's very similar, not 100%. If you take a little more time, you're gonna actually figure it out ways to kind of make it as close as possible, or really close to it, or actually the same thing too as well. But it's up to you. You got to spend a little more time. Just for tutorial purpose, I didn't want to take a lot of time to kind of make it exactly the same, but I'm just going to give you the idea on how I was able to create all those different elements, creating brushes and so on. If you notice here, this are some of my text brushes that I did. I was just kind of playing around. We're going to use some of my favorite tools. My blend tool, I love the blend tool. Working with the blend tool in Illustrator is one of my favorites. I like using the appearance window. And if you notice here, I have my different tabs or windows that we're going to be using. We're going to be using the brush window, the swatches, the appearance, the transparency for the blend modes. And from there, I'm going to show you how you can apply different effects to kind of create this kind of blurry effects and so on. So moving along, guys, if you like what you see here, please don't forget to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button and give me any type of feedback. Let me know how we can improve this tutorial. Let me know what else you guys would like to see from me, and I'm more than welcome to create some content. But please don't forget to subscribe. That way I can continue creating this type of content for you guys. All right. If you notice here on the top, I kind of started creating some other type of effects. This is basically, I would just start creating, you notice here, let me ungroup all this stuff here so you guys can see what I did. So it's a bunch of lines, squiggle little lines, and then I just start building right on top of it to create all those different effects. This one was a little bit more, actually a little more simpler, because what I did was I was able to duplicate this guy, change the color, make it a little bit darker, and I put it right on top of it, and using blend modes, I was able to create what I needed. So I'm going to stop talking here and let's get to it. I'm going to start with a new document. I'm going to bring this as a reference just so I can have it. So I'm going to create a new document, Control N or Command N, art and illustration. I'm just going to change my orientation here and just kind of create it from default. I'm going to paste my artwork just to kind of get my inspiration going. And one of the things I'm going to do here, I can leave it there or move it to the side, whatever you guys want. Now, if you guys would like to lock your artwork with an Illustrator, shortcut, Control Command 2, or you can always go to Object, Lock Selection here, okay? So very useful. The reason why I like to do that is once I click and drag, doesn't allow me to move my reference image. All right, so let's get to it. First thing I'm going to show you how we can create this very thin line that is all around this effect. I mean, if you guys find other ways to do this, please post them, send me somewhere where I can learn it as well, so that way we can all learn together. So let's take a look at this. The way I like to use or create those brushes is very simple. I like to start with a ellipse. I'm going to click on my artboard and let's make it about 10 by 10 points. All right. It's going to be small circle. I don't like to work with outlines. I'm just going to remove my outline and make it black. Now, one of the things I want to do here is I want to be able to remove my handles from the left and the right. One of the ways you can do that is basically I can select it. I can select both of them. You're going to notice here where it says convert. We can click that convert, and that's one way to do it. Another way you can do it is if you click and hold on the pen tool, you're going to see the anchor point tool, and also you can click on those points as well. All right, so basically that's my first brush. I'm going to select it and I'm going to drag. Actually, let me duplicate it. I want to have a white one as well because I like to different shades and stuff like that. If I want to add highlights and stuff, I can actually use a white one. I'm going to select this guy and drop it into my brush window. I want to create an art brush. I'm going to hit OK. Now, I like to name my stuff. I'm just going to name it EP for a penguin brush. And I'm going to name it 01, right? So you guys can name it whatever you guys want. You can put more description if you want. Also, if you're using a stylus as well, you're going to notice that here you have pressure, styles, stylus wheel, and so on. So you can change a lot of those options. I'm going to leave everything default in this section. Now, this part right here is very useful. It says direction. It actually shows you the direction on how this object or this brush is going to be created. You can use the stroke from left, going from the left to the right, or from right to left. You can go up, from up to down, or down up, either or. So that means that's how that object is going to be created. I like to do it basically from left to right. And one of the things I'm going to change with this is the method here. This method, I'm going to change the tint and shades, actually just the tints for right now. And that's what it's going to allow me to do is basically being able to change the color of my brushes without having to create a brush with unique colors as I go, right? Like if I want to make a red, I want to make a yellow, green, whatever might be the case, I can have this black. By changing the method to tint, it will allow me to change any of those tints color. And basically, I'm going to hit OK. That's my first brush is recorded here. I'm going to drop my other brush in there. That's going to be my white one. I'm going to make it as an R brush. I'm going to go same way, and it's going to be EP. And I'm going to name it brush 02. And everything's going to stay the same. I don't want to change any of the tints, any of that. I'm just going to keep it everything default. I'm going to hit OK. And there it is, my secondary brush. And there's 1 and 2, right? So how this little guys work, you're going to notice I can grab my brush tool by clicking the letter B. And here it is, like boy. I can select my paintbrush. And let's say, for example, I start on the black. And what I can do here, you're going to notice I create a nice little line. It kind of gives me that nice taper from both ends. You're going to notice that right now my color is white. I can change this to red, and automatically it would change that to whatever color I want. And that's why it's very important to go back and make sure that you go and edit that tint. If you forgot how to do it, you can always double click on the brush, change the properties, hit OK, and automatically would update this. So I can just hit OK, and if I did some changes, automatically would change it within Illustrator. Now, some of the cool features I like to use within the brush is changing my blend mode, changing my opacity. I can change my opacity to 25. And what this allows me to do is similar to if I'm working with almost like a marker or something related to that. The more times I go over the brush or the stroke allows me to create different tones or highlights within my brush stroke. And of course, if I change this to an overlay, so you do an overlay and you change this to 100% as well, you're going to see that doesn't do much, but you can do a 50% here, and you can play around with the percentage of your transparency to kind of get that kind of effects. If you're doing like, I don't know, like a dove or something like that has some nice little feathers, and you can just do this very, very quickly. And there's some, I don't know, like a stem here, and it has little leaves, and you can just get created with this little effect. The cool thing about it, you can control the thickness of your brush as well. And basically you can just start creating some nice little details. And one of my favorite tools is just using this, changing the opacity of it. So this is the way I like to use my brush. The other one is this little white one. The white one is just going to be white. I can change my opacity to 25 as well. I can just put this to normal. And this is going to give me a little bit brightness into my scene. If you notice, if I go over and over, I like to use 25 and play around with this opacity to see wherever my light is going to be casting. Let's say it's coming from this angle from the right. I can just start adding some nice little details on those areas, and you can start seeing some nice little details within just basic lines as well. So my whole thing, whenever you design, guys, keep it simple. Go back to basics. The simpler it is, the better your results are going to be. And you notice here, by just playing around with the thickness of your brush, I can do like 0.1. You get some very cool little effects by just changing the thickness of your brush, and you start getting some nice little colors, almost like a little watercolor effects as well that you can actually use. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So those are those two brushes. The next thing I'm going to do is how we can actually create the brushes that create those kind of like the cloud effect, right? So I played around with different things, and basically what I did here for this brush is I play around with a lot of different stuff. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the lips tool. You guys can keep it round or whatever might be the case. I'm just going to click on my stage here, and I'm going to make it 100 by 100. You guys can make it whatever size you want, whatever applies to you. And probably 100 by 100 is going to be pretty big, especially if you're going to do brushes with a stroke. So let's do it again. I apologize. Let's see what else I can do. Maybe like let's do 50 by 50. That's kind of cool. And what I'm going to do here, if you guys notice, basically there's a bunch of colors kind of coming around. There's like a gradation between these and these. Several ways you can do it. You can bring up another brush, create this little effects with dark brushes. I'm going to see how close I can get to this using the method that I use for creating the brushes. So let's see how it works for me. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to grab and select this guy, and I'm going to work with gray tones. So I want this to be a lighter color. So I'm going to use kind of like my gray tones default swatches here. And I'm going to use this the second option here of the gray tone, and make sure that it's a fill, not an outline. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Actually, you know what? This one I want to make it darker. So I'm going to go from the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do 6. So 6 is going to be in the middle. The next one I'm going to do is maybe something like this. And I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to hold my Alt key on a PC or Option. I'm going to click and drag holding my Shift key. And I'm going to change this to a lighter color. I'm going to change that to a lighter color. Now, I want to make sure that if you notice, this object is on top of it. I want to make sure that I go to right click, arrange, send to the back. I want it to be in the back of it, just for my effects purpose. Okay. Now I'm going to do that. One of the things I'm going to do here, I'm going to duplicate this guy here. I'm going to go to edit, copy, edit, paste in front. The reason why I want to do that is because I want to have this cut in half, something like this. I want to have something cut in half, and I want to have maybe a little bit darker in between it, a darker color, right? A different tone in it. So it's going to be like almost like a half tone here. And then I'm going to duplicate the circle again, and I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to choose this lighter gray tone, right? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, basically circles. I'm going to group this too, so that way Illustrator reads it as a single object. Control G. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two guys, and I'm going to go to edit, copy, edit, paste in front. Once it's pasted in the front, I'm going to right click on it, transform and reflect. That way they are flipped. And I'm going to drag it to the other side. If you notice, if I click and drag and I hold my shift key, there are those magenta marquee that basically allows you to put it in the same place as the other side. So I'm going to grab this guys here so you guys can see what I did. So it was just a duplication of these little guys. Cool. Moving forward, you notice that it has a little bit of texture here. It has a little kind of like fluffy. You want to make it a little bit fluffy on the clouds. Now you got to be very careful on this next step. I'm going to duplicate this just in case I need this to do something else later on. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab, I'm going to use a tool here that's going to allow me to create kind of like little fluffiness in there. And we're going to go over this tool. It's a very cool little tool. So that tool, if you click and hold, normally is the width tool here is selected, but you're going to find it if you click and hold, and it's called the Wrinkle Tool. If you click on the Wrinkle Tool, this is going to give you a little brush in there. Now, what I like to do is I like to double click on that. And it's going to give you the width, the height, the angle. My angle was set up to 0 normally. So you can use a pressure pen as well. If you press, it's going to give you more effects, whatever might be the case. But for right now, I'm going to leave it I'm going to put about 50. Let's do 50 here. Angle is 45. Intensity is 50. That's fine. The more intensity, the more effects it's going to apply to it, the more wrinkles it's going to give you. Horizontal 100, vertical 100. Complexity, I just want to do 1. I don't want to have so much complex elements. And then we're going to go over some other, we're going to change this later on so we can do some other cool things, kind of like the trees and stuff like that, or those bushes. Let me put this to 1. And it says brush affects anchor point. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit OK. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start selecting these little guys here. I'm going to select them all here. So that way I don't have to be selecting individual. So if I grab my Wrinkle tool, and you're going to notice if I click into it, it's going to give me this kind of cool little wrinkle into it, right? So it kind of creates this kind of fluffiness. Now, again, if it is too much, what happens if you do this, it's going to start creating a bunch of points. Be very careful with this because it's going to become very, very heavy. The least amount of points with more details, the better it is. I'm even thinking still too heavy for me. I'm going to go back to my Wrinkle tool, and I'm going to change my intensity. I might even do about 15. And from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start wrinkling. You know, it's kind of gives me almost like this little fluff. And I'm going to do the same thing to this guys here, just to kind of change it a little bit. Do it here. And do it here. Right, all the spheres that I changed, or circles, not sphere. So there we have it. We have some effects in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my blend tool. I love using the blend tool to create a lot of my effects. And the way you use the blend tool is if you select this little tool right here, I'm going to double click on it. And I want to make sure that there's a little, by default, it's going to give you a smooth color. I'm going to use specify step. I'm going to start about 4 of them right now, and I'm going to hit OK. You're going to notice it gives you this blend tool. When I hover over an object, it's going to give you a little asterisk. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go over on top of it. It's going to give you a plus sign. It's going to give you a plus sign. It's going to give you a plus sign, and everything is blending the way that I want it. Right, so I got this kind of shading, this kind of cool effect. Now, the reason why I want all those different shadings is, remember, this is what we're trying to achieve, all this bunch of colors, cloud fluffiness. Now, if for blend modes, blend 4 steps is too much, you can change this and hit the tab key on your keyboard, and you can actually control it that way as well. Okay, now what you can do here, you can always double click, and you're going to notice you're going to be inside the blend option. And now each objects are independent from each other. But if you go into them, you're going to notice that now you can move this close to each other, right? If you want to create a specific look and feel. If I click and drag on the other one, I just got to remember which ones are the ones that I created. I can actually create and move them this way and customize them the way that, and I'm just holding my shift key so that way I don't lose my position of my object. Let's say something like that. I'm gonna hit the escape key, and now I got this nice, interesting look of my objects. So another cool thing here, I'm gonna apply an effect into this. I'm gonna apply an effect. I'm gonna select Windows, I'm sorry, Effect, Distort and Transform. And I'm going to use this free transform here. Okay, this free transform is pretty cool. And basically what allows you to do is grab those little corners here, and it allows you to do this, right? Like a taper. Now, one of the things that I did, I just realized right now is basically I wanted to taper those before I made those changes. So I'm going to cancel this. So I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to remove the blend mode so that way I can taper both sides the way that I want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo my blend modes. And now what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to grab my blend tool and I'm going to click, click, and click. All right, so that's one. And then I'm going to go to Effect. I'm going to go to Distort and Transform, Free Transform, and I'm going to taper my left side. And I'm just going to taper this a little bit, and I'm just going to make sure that I grab that little point in there that I'm having issues grabbing it. Notice that this one grabs, but this one for some reason is not grabbing. There we go. And hit OK. So that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my blend tool. I'm going to come from this side, and this side. All right. So now I have all this object selected. I'm going to go to Effect, Distort, my free transform. I'm going to apply a new effects to it. And it's messing up what I want. Hold on. Let me see here. Sorry, guys. It's not working the way that I want, but we make it work. So this is what I'm going to do. Plan B. I'm going to copy this guy. I'm going to blend it first. Then I'm going to go to Effect, Distort and Transform, Free Distort, and then I'm going to bring it up. I apologize if I'm confusing you. I just done it several times and I forgot that I had to do it independently from one side to the other in order for it to work. There we go. All right, so that's fine. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this guy. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste in Front. And what I can do, Object, Transform, Reflect, and I can reflect it this way, right? So now it should be reflecting the way that I want. Now, if you notice, it did some weird stuff because what happened is that now my transform is being applied to the left side of my object. So this is the way that you can fix this. If you notice here on the free transform, I can go into the appearance window. If I double click on it, I can reset it. And then I can grab this side right here. I'm just pulling this little point to the left and then allows me to drag it. I'm going to hit OK, and now I got what I want. I'm going to put this guy right on top of it. There we go. I'm going to group both objects, and then I can drag and drop this into my brush. It's going to ask me what kind of brush I want. I want an R brush. I'm going to hit OK. EP, brush, 03. I'm going to leave it as is, and I'm going to make it from left to right. I'm going to leave this as a tint, and I think I can hit OK, and I'm good with that. So now I have a brush right here. It looks pretty cool. Now let's test this little guy out and see how it's going to work. If I grab my brush tool, you're going to notice that I'm going to try to see if I can create that little guy. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to create some swirls like that. If I grab it and I apply it, right now it's set to white. Depending on the color that I choose now, if I use the colors, take a look at now. Now it starts creating this nice little effects within your brush. Now you got all this bunch of cool different shadings, a bunch of different effects that you can use as well. And this is one of the ways that you guys can play around to kind of achieve that look. Now, these little guys here, several things you can do here. I can always get rid of this guys here and do basically the same thing. And I can, let me duplicate this guy here. I just need this guy so that way I can blend it together and I can make sure that, let me get rid of this. I can grab this, copy, paste in front, object, transform, reflect. I'm gonna hit OK. I'm gonna put this guy over here. Cool. So I'm just gonna put it on the side just so I can see it. And I can blend these guys, right? Blend them together. Blend, blend, blend. That's this guy. And I can grab this blend. Sometimes what happens is there's too much detail there and you start running into all these issues. And it's just one of those things that you got to play around with. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to Effect, Distort and Transform, Free Transform. And I'm going to do the same thing to the left, taper it out. Hit OK. Select it, Effect, Distort, Free Distort, and I'm going to come this way. Remember, if you cannot grab it, you can always click and drag it to the left or to the right and allows you to move those little points. Takes a little bit, but it's not that bad. Hit OK. Now I'm going to align them properly. Drag it. I'm going to hit R brush, hit OK. EP brush 04. And this is the way I start testing my brushes, tint, so that we can change the color. And if you notice now I have it here, I can apply that brush to it and you start getting a little more effects. The cool thing about this is that I can crank up the size of the brush and you start getting all these cool little effects in there. So I kind of like how this one looks better. And then you guys can see how I start getting some of those effects within that. I can start rotating things. Other things you can do with the path, you can go under Object, Path, and you can do a reverse path direction. And it's going to give you a whole different look as well. So let me show you how I do another effect, just kind of using the same method here, right? So I'm going to duplicate this guy. I'm going to break it over here and I'm going to make it smaller. And I'm going to rotate it just a little bit like that. And I'm going to change the blue tone to maybe something darker, let's say, for example. It's going to be like a gray. So it's going to be on top of this, right? Now what I can do is I can use my blend mode for those two shapes. I can click on it. It's going to give you the asterisk. Then it's going to give you a plus sign. Now it's going to give you this weird looking thing, right? So if you like this is where you want to go. That's kind of cool. Other things you can do, you can double click on this. It goes inside the blend. And now I can grab this shape and you notice that I can actually rotate this and starts creating a whole different look and feel of your blend. I can move it around, starts creating almost like this fluffiness, this whole different look of your clouds. And if you scale it, you keep scaling it, you're going to notice how things, they start changing. All the things that you can do here is basically we can change the blend mode to like an overlay and you start getting some effects in there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can always change this. Even the opacity, you can play with this. And you guys are going to notice that now the opacity kind of works for you as well. It starts creating some nice kind of shadow effect. So you can do something like that. You can lower the size of your stroke and see what's going to work for you. And also, you can use the other brush that we created, the other one with the different dots as well, and see what works for you. But the cool thing is that you have this little history that you can always come and move it around and create this kind of very cool effect. Now, if your blend is too much, you can always go back to your blend property, right? To your blend property. You can double click on it and I can highlight the number. Right now I have 4 different blends. If I use my up and down arrow on my keyboard, you're going to notice that I can add or subtract. I can add more details, less. It's going to give you less detail, but you can sometimes if that's the look that you're going for, you can do this as well. Let's say I'm going to use 2. That kind of looks kind of cool. So I kind of like where this is going. And let's say, for example, something into this, right? You start creating your own look. You're going to notice that there are these darker areas, and that's where the other brushes come handy. So I'm going to hit the letter I just to kind of grab those colors. If I grab, oops, make sure nothing is selected. I had my object selected on the top. I'm going to grab my brush tool, letter I first for the eyedropper, grab that color. And I'm going to grab this black brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of create this. I'm just going to make it like that. And I'm going to crank up the size. All right, I'm going to crank up the size. I'm going to grab the letter B again. And now you're going to notice that I can create all those little effects. There you go. And then you can do that manually as well. If you have a stylus, it works a lot better. So here we go. So now if I put this on top, I can actually start creating some nice little depth within my clouds and start creating those nice little effects. I can duplicate this. And of course, you can always play around with the colors and paste it behind it, right? So I got that cloud there. And if I want to do these little guys here, I can grab my brush tool and I can just do this. If you notice, that's kind of because it's using that brush that I selected. I can use my brush here and I can grab my brush and create all this nice little effects. And I can always bring all these guys to the back, crank up the size of it, Control X to cut, Control back, and then I can have my clouds kind of affecting that on the background. So if you notice, that's how I'm able to control those clouds. And remember, you can always select the letter A. The letter A, it gives you the direct selection tool. If I select this path right here, that controls that blue color, I can always come to my swatches and I can control the colors of my cloud. And since it's under a blend tool, automatically it's going to update all those colors. So even if I select my other blend that I created here and I make it purple or magenta, you're going to notice that it creates that nice little effect here. So it basically kind of gives you a nice little result, almost like a real-time render. You can actually control the look and feel of that cloud, right? So it matches the look that you have. And then we can use one of those brushes here, right? We'll grab the brush. Oh, even the white one is kind of cool. And let's change the color to white and I can create those nice little brush strokes. Now, but if you notice this little brush stroke, it has kind of like a blur into it. So I will create a simple brush. I will just create a line. Or you know what? Let's go back to my little guy here. My little brush right here. I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to go to Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Now, 5 is too much. Let's say about 1, depending on the size, right? So I'm going to do like about 0.5. I think it's going to be good. It's going to give me a nice little blurriness. I can drop it into my brushes. R brush, hit OK. EP brush 0.5, I think it is. There it is. So that's my brush. And now I can select my brush here and I can apply it to that. Now you're going to notice it's going to give me this weird look like that. Now, what I figured out is basically what I got to do is I can scale this way. Now you're going to notice once you scale it, what's going to happen, your blur is going to change. Now, if you notice your blur, it's going to be pixelated. That's because it's using a bitmap blur effect, similar to Photoshop. So there's ways to change this. If you ever use effects in Illustrator, if you go to Effect and you go to Document Raster Effects, you go into that window You change this to 300 or 150 ppi. Excuse me. And if you notice, it's going to do a change here on your pixel base. It's going to give you a little more blurriness. Now, that step, I recommend doing it at the end. Once you're done with the file, ready to send it to print and stuff like that, change it after. Change it to 300 dpi. That happens when you create a new document. You can notice it creates a new document, and it gives you an option right here. It says raster effect. By default, it's set to 72 ppi. But I recommend doing this, keep it like that, because if you have a lot of those effects and you're, doing a lot of brushes, you have a lot of blur, it's going to slow down your machine. So I recommend keeping it the way it is and basically change it at the end of your, once you're done, ready to send your file to print or save it as a PDF, whatever format you're going to do it. But you notice the difference from 300 ppi to 72 ppi is a big difference. So I'm going to leave it like that. And I'm going to overwrite this little brush right here. If I select my brush and I drag on top of it, holding my Alt or Option key, it's going to pop up. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to ask me, do you want to apply it to all the objects that have been applied this specific brush? I'm going to say yes. And there it is. Now it creates this nice little blur effects. I can control the thickness of it. I can grab my brush tool and I can start creating all those nice little effects that I need within my scene, right? So that's one way to create it. I can just create this little guy like that and send it to the back and crank the size of the brush. And I can put all this back. Right, so there you have it. I'm just going to do a rectangle just to kind of create my background. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab letter I. A quick way to add colors to your color swatches. So I'm going to, if you grab the letter I, you click here. Here's the reference color. I'm going to grab this lighter color and just drag it into this. I'm going to drop a gradient into my object, grab my gradient tool, going into this angle. If you notice, my gradient is right here, and this is one of the windows I forgot to add to it, but it's very simple. I can drag my dark to this side and my light to this side as well. Okay, you can always play around with these colors if you need to. If you want to delete anything, just drag it to the bottom. I can make this a little bit darker if I need to, right? That looks kind of cool. Oops, I moved my gradient. I can align this to the center of my page, cut it, and I can put it behind the artwork that I'm creating. And you notice that now it starts taking place. If this guy is not working the way that you want, you can always change the colors, whatever might be the case, and play around with this to see what's going to be the best fit for it. So let's say, for example, now I want to look at this effects. You're going to see here, if I change this to 300 dpi, you're going to see that hopefully my blurriness, let me change, effect, document. I don't know why it didn't change, but normally it does change this. And I think it might be the distance between the objects and stuff like that. Probably something that I change within my settings. Another way that I like to create brushes, if you guys run into this issue, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around, I just thought of something. I can create an ellipse. Let's make it 50 and 50. And this is another way you can do it as well, right? So what I can do, grab my points here and cut those guys in, make it white. I make it white, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it, right, to the sides, just going to create this kind of taper look. And I'm going to squash it. Now there's many ways to do this, right? So I'm going to do something like this. Then I'm going to go to Object, Path, Offset Path. Offset Path is going to create an offset, a new document behind a new object, not a document, an object. And I'm going to put 10. And it's going to create this kind of rounded shape, I can come here and miter. It's going to give you a weird change here. You can always control this by changing this. You see this, if I add this to about 40, maybe 10 is too much. Maybe if I hit 5, I think that looks kind of cool. So it creates a new object behind it. I'm going to make that object 0. And this is just another way that I like to create my blurs. And I'm going to grab my blend tool and I'm going to click my asterisk. It's going to give me my plus sign. And it creates this nice little blur. Now, right now, it's going to be pixelated because the blend mode is only 4 times. Now, the higher that number, right, the more details you have. It's up to you what type of machine you have. It's going to run the memory of it. I'm kind of cool with 7. That kind of looks kind of cool. And I can just drag this guy and create a new art brush, hit OK. And this could be my other brush. 06, hit OK. And there it is. So now I got this brush that is not gonna, it's gonna make it better than having that blur effect. So you just got to be careful on using effects. You run into those issues. You got to find ways that to make it work. So I just created this, and you're gonna notice now it's a lot cleaner. Now I can even apply a blur on top of that and kind of clean those guys up. I can go to effects. I can do a Gaussian blur and blur those guys out if I need to, and it's a lot cleaner, and you have smooth objects. Now the same thing here, I'm not going to duplicate, I'm not going to recreate this, so I'm just going to grab these little guys and paste it in the back. So kind of continue what I have. And what I can do here is I can grab all these guys here. I can group them or I can make them independent from each other, and I can apply that Gaussian blur just to kind of create a little bit of that fuzziness of it. It kind of gives you kind of like that nice little effect, fluffy effects as well. And it depends, this is what you want to do. It makes it very nice and easy. So just another way to create this type of effects. Again, Gaussian blur, you can hit OK, and you have a nice little Gaussian. If this color doesn't apply, again, you can always change blend modes. You can change your opacity. That way you have some nice little detail. All right, so let me bring this outside here just to show you real quick how I can create those little bush in there. And then, of course, like everything else, you can just very quickly, I can duplicate these guys and rotate them and scale them up and do something to them. You know, you guys take your time and do it nicer than me, but just to give you an idea. And then I will duplicate them and start creating that. All right, so basically this, the way that I will create this floor is I will create pen tool, click and drag, and create. I like, if you're doing bleeds, I always recommend to create bleeds, make it outside. Grab a base color. Your base color might be this guy here. You can do this. Shift X, so it allows you to view it as an outline. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit the letter P again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this dark grass, kind of like shadow on the grass. And I can come this way, and that's cool. I grab that dark color, Shift X. Now take a look at this. If I'm going to create those, that grass here, I can grab my brush, my black brush, B, let's say the letter I, so I can grab those dark color, B, and basically I can just start creating those little guys in there. And if I change this to like a 50%, right, I can always change this and go around, and now you get a nice effect within that. Very simple. So now we grab this guy, Shift X, is going to be my grass. Shift X, it's going to be that. Now from here, if I go to Effect, Gaussian Blur, apply a nice little blur to it, and it's going to soften the edges of your artwork. And then I like to use this in Illustrator because I always can come back. It's a vector piece. I don't have to go to Photoshop and recreate things. I like to kind of push the envelope within Illustrator. I really love doing that. And this is the way that I will illustrate all this if it was created in Illustrator. If I drag this little guy on the back, you're gonna notice that starts looking pretty cool. The other thing, the actual trees here, guys, same effects that I'm gonna do is I can grab I did recycle my little guys. Remember I recycled these guys here? So I'm gonna make it very simple. So I'm gonna grab this guy and this guy right here. So I'm looking at this light right here, light, and then there's this dark area. So I'm gonna make it close to each other. And I'm gonna use my wrinkle tool. I'm gonna wrinkle this guy a lot. You see this? I can wrinkle it as much as I want. And the same thing to this guy. And now I create wrinkles into it. And what I'm going to do, blend tool, click and click. Now I got to blend. Now, if you notice, I like to put this object behind this guy. I like my highlights to be in the front. So I can grab my direct selection tool. Once I blend it, I can select it, right click, arrange, send to back. There it is. And now I have that. And one of the things I'm going to do is I can drag this into my brushes, EP, just El Penguin, brush 07. There it is. My brush is in there. How I would do this, little guys, several ways. You can do circles, or you can just grab the pen tool or the brush tool. And what you can do is just almost like kind of creating the silhouette of this little guy in here. And I'm going to come into the middle and just kind of create little twirly things in there. And if you take a look at that, now I have this little guy. Now, one of the things that I forgot is I forgot to change my tint into it, right? I forgot the tint of my object. So I got to go back to this, right? And I can change this to tints. And it's going to tell me if I want to change it. I'm going to hit OK. Hit apply to stroke, and now it does the change that I want. Now, if you notice, I have my white in there, and I can actually play around with this thing, right? So I can duplicate this. Several things. It's not getting my greens and stuff like that. I can change this as well. I can come into the tints and shades, and that starts working a little bit better. I can apply it. Now, if you notice in this aspect, remember that I mentioned about keeping the highlights in the front, and it's something that you got to play around with and see what is going to work the best for you. So I can grab this guy, and I can right click on it, arrange, bring to the front, and I can hold my Alt key, and I can drag it right on top of it and overwrite that guy, and now it's on the top. Now, this method doesn't work well because I'm not getting a lot of that fuzz in there. Now, what I would do is I will grab even circles. I'll grab a bunch of little circles, and I apply that effect. Change my thickness of my brush, and if you notice now I got that. Now, what's happening here is that I didn't add a lot of that effects from this guy here. So I can also crank up the intensity, maybe about 30, double that. And I can change the complexity a little bit more. So that way gives me a little more rough edges. And now when I do this, you're going to notice now I'm going to start getting some interesting stuff. And I can do that to that guy, letter A. Grab this guy, and I can roughen it up more. See here, so I just want those edges to be a little bit rough. So I got that guy in there, and what I can do is I can grab it, go on top of it, Alt key, hit OK, apply, and now we got a different look on your on your tree here, on the bush. And what I can do, I can change it. Also, if your blend mode is too little, you can double click, change the blend mode to 7 or 10, whatever is going to apply to you on your effects. That way you have more shadings. And you always try to test this out. Drag that into it, apply it, hit OK. Now it starts getting a little bit more detail. Right? So I can grab this guy and I can duplicate it, and I can start playing around with this guy and basically right click, transform, reflect, hit OK. I can rotate this. Now I can make another brush that has more darkness instead of this, right? But what I like about this is once I do a brush on top of it, I can grab my brush and I can grab a yellow color into it. And if I change my opacity to like a 25%, I can just drag this little guy on top of it. And you notice it starts giving me some nice little highlights, nice little tones into onto the bush. And whatever color I use, even the light or dark greens, I can just start dropping those little guys on it. And you start getting some nice little effects. So that will be one of the ways that I will create this kind of effect. If you're creating just a single tree in a way, overlay, let me see if my overlay is going to work for me. Let me crank up my size and I can do something like this. And I can change my color and it creates nice, fun, almost like a Dr. Seuss style, right? So grab the brush tool and you can just create some very cool effect. Grab some yellows, start bringing some of those yellows into it. And even with the browns, if you want to do trees, you can just grab this guy here. And if you can taper this, guys. If you notice, I go on top of it, it starts creating all this type of highlights and different tones. Changing the brown is going to give me a whole different look. And you can start having fun using this type of brushes. Now, the other thing you can do, you notice you have this uniform. I can use my width profile and allows me to create this whole different look as well. And again, changing the color of my browns, I can start adding some nice little highlights, changing the thickness of it. You start creating some very unique shapes just using brushes. And that's probably one of the ways that will help you create this type of effect. And I will group these little guys, and I will take my time and kind of create everything else. And of course, you guys are the artists. You guys create your own. This was just a reference from this artist that is very cool. I really like the concept, and I was just trying to see if I'm able to do it. Probably with a little more time, I would see if I can get a little more realistic instead of using a Photoshop or Procreate. Nothing wrong with them. I just love using vector, especially for my books. So this will be just kind of a way to create it. The cool thing about this is that I have this bunch of spheres or circles. I keep calling them spheres. And in there, if you lock all your elements, Control 2, you're going to get somewhere in there. I can move them around and I can create custom shapes, right? So I can just grab this guy and I'm just hitting Control 2 so I can lock them out. And you can see here, I can start placing them and rotating them. And it doesn't take that long once you start seeing some nice little results into your objects. I can scale this up so it doesn't stay the same. And you can start seeing some nice little effect. All right, guys. So I think this cover, and hopefully this gives you an idea on how you can create something in watercolor or some type of effects in watercolor in Illustrator. make sure you subscribe. Give me some feedback. Let me know how can I improve this. Anything else that you guys would like to see. If you have an image that you guys want me to recreate, just let me know. Just give me some time to do this. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and it was very helpful. And don't forget to continue creating. Have a blessed day, guys. Take care.